Affairs, on page 7 of the Standard, we have a story on the SGR. Now the title is "No Kenyan Asset Has Been Mortgaged for SGR." This is according to a Chinese envoy who has given that assurance. And this is a major concern when it comes to the SGR, because a lot of people feel that if we are not able to pay off these loans, then we're having some of our major assets taken away. But then China has denied those claims, and that its policy towards Africa and especially Kenya is that of debt trap. Now I'll start with you. Just what do you feel about this?
The reality is that our fundamentals as far as economic growth, which are highly normative in nature, have some fundamental flaws.
Yes.
And the thinking that infrastructure opens up a country, infrastructure will be a game changer, particularly may not really be working in this side of the world, because if you look at the balance of trade, then you're talking about a country that is highly an import country as opposed to an export. So you have, for instance, the SGR arriving in Nairobi with lots of goods, but by the time it goes back to Mombasa, it's almost carrying very little, because apart from our coffee and
horticultural
produce, which we really prefer to airlift, it will be very difficult. So in all fairness, SGR I think is overestimated, and you just need to look at the kind of promises that were made, that when SGR arrives is a game changer. But how many jobs have we seen SGR create? What was this really big thing that one can vouch for after investing more than 327 billion into this project? But I think that is important to understand that most of these contracts that we put pen to paper are contracts that are not subject perhaps to public a lot of scrutiny from the public, and that's why it's almost impossible, because no one really knows the exact content of the SGR. The information available is very scanty, and when you look at a project that right from its planning, design, implementation, operations and maintenance, it seems to favor one party. You look at how much money we've spent and how much of this money has really been spent in Kenya, then it raises serious fundamental issues. So it calls for he who pays the piper definitely must call for the tune.
And I mean, to play devil's advocate, to make it clear, the SGR is not just meant to get all the way to Malaba. Then, I mean, it's opening up Kenya to even Uganda. Uganda is supposed to take it over and all the way to Congo. So we are not just thinking about exports from Kenya. We are thinking about other countries being a part of it. So over to you, Mr. Andika. When you see the story, what do you feel? And just to quote the new Chinese ambassador to Kenya, Mr. Wu Peng, who downplayed the concerns and said there are no collaterals attached to the loans secured by Jubilee administration since 2013. Mr. Ndika.
I think what comes to my mind when I read about the SGR loan and the fact that we could actually be mortgaging our country is to begin to ask myself, if we actually really have to take so many loans in order to develop our country, and for example put up the SGR, and yet research has shown that it may not be sustainable if we are just putting up an SGR and focusing on passenger transport alone, unless we are going to transport all the goods that we want to transport into the interiors of this country, and then we are able to collaborate with our neighbors so that then it becomes feasible. We want to look at an SGR where we should be able to be told when is it able to break even, when can it be sustainable.
Right. And then there's the question of, do we as such documents meant to be in the public? And can everybody have access to that kind of contract and get the details? Because there's a journalist who was promised, but then after consultation with the judicial, he was told, it was found out that this is not the type of document that you just publicize. So we can't necessarily lay claim to that
and that is what now breeds the suspicion that probably as a country we may be sinking in so much, we may be taking so much of what we may not be able to repay, and where we are not able to repay in the short run, then
anybody can begin to say, then it is like we are mortgaging our country.
Yeah.
Because then it means China would run over the country anytime because of the many loans, because we seem to be so much bending towards borrowing to finance development of this country.
Okay, now just to quote him again, he said, I can confirm that funding for Naivasha-Kisumu SGR was not on the agenda of President Uhuru Kenyatta and Xi Jinping's meeting in Beijing during the Belt and Road Forum. That is the recent a meeting that had tongues wagging and everybody going on about the loan that was denied. I'd like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, you know, the expectation that the discussion about the SGR from Naivasha to Kisumu came about when Raila was addressing his supporters back down in the larger Nyanza region. And the idea was that we are now together, and because we are working together, this thing is going to move from Naivasha to Kisumu here. So give me time to keep working with the government. Things will change. But be it as it may, why we are not seeing the benefits of the SGR is what we started with. We do not have a working framework with our neighbors, because if you look at where the SGR passes in Taita Taveta, in the southern part of Kajiado, we have farmers who coexist in Kenya and Tanzania. And it would have been prudent if the central government was working with the county governments in that area, that part of that produce, agricultural produce that comes in from the fertile areas below Mount Kilimanjaro, get onto the SGR to get to the coast. When the train is coming in from the coast, we get such produce to come into Nairobi. But the people who are supposed to make these decisions are the ones who own the tracks of the road. So there is a conflict of interest right there. And they are not going to work for the interests of the citizen so that we are able to repay
because
this debt.
Because that will mean their trucks are taken off the road.
They're taken off.
All
so
imports,
it is, and when the president talked about public servants and business, it was very sad that he focused on the lowly people, he focused on the police, and he was not talking about his own advisors, the people he sits with for breakfast every day, who engage in business that is in direct conflict of interest.